how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uh, mentions that He is the one who named you Muslims, and He is the one who taught you how to surrender in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every command that Ibrahim gave, and every test that he tested Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was the one who says, Aslamtu li Rabbil Alamin. I submit to the Rabb of all the nations. Today, we are going to learn much more of those legacies that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala beautifully captures in Surah Al-An'am. And this is the legacy of yaqeen. This is the legacy of conviction of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Uh, Before I come to the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the environments that he grew up in. What was the circumstances that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this majestic prophet in? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Ibrahim alayhi salam to grow up in one of the darkest environments. It was not a very spiritual environment, sajid and everything around him that helped him grow in Iman. No, it was one of the darkest environments if you think about it. It's an environment of shirk. It was an environment of idol worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the 75th or 74th ayah of Surah Al-An'am, وإذ قال إبراهيم لأبيه آزر أتتخذ أصناما آلهة. Ibrahim alayhi salam said to his father Azar, do you take idols as gods? أتتخذ أصناما آلهة. You have taken these asnam, these carved out idols as ilah, as something that you're going to worship. إني أراك وقومك في ضلال مبين. Indeed, I see you and your people in clear misguidance. So he grew up surrounded by temples and rituals and false gods, and this doing shirk was normal in society. Today we grew up in not necessarily idol worshipping, but there are some cultural aspects that we grew up with, and it is for us to think about those cultural norms and practices which sometimes go against what our Islam teaches, and it is for us to think that are we going to submit to those idol worshipping, those quote unquote idols, or are we going to question them? So Ibrahim alayhi salam teaches us that Islam is just not a cultural inheritance, right? And this is one of the greatest lessons from Ibrahim alayhi salam, that we learn that we are not just Muslims because our parents were Muslim, or we learn that something from somebody blindly, right? It is not just a cultural norm that we practice blindly. Every single individual who says La ilaha illallah must personally arrive at this conclusion and this conviction, right? So the societal pressure and societal norms do not lead us to Islam the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to believe in, the way Ibrahim alayhi salam teaches us. When Allah says, Millat Abikum Ibrahim, is we follow the millah of your father Ibrahim. That millah itself means that you have to believe with the heart and the mind. With the heart and the mind together in place to question the falsehood around you. And to remain firm even when the society moves away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What happens if somebody just follows the cultural norms in their practice of this deed? When that norm goes away, when they move out of their society, their Islam will go away. Right? If that Islam was just to follow everybody is going to Jummah, so I'm going to Jummah too. If everybody is fasting, so we are fasting, and we don't know why we are fasting. We never thought about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we never reflected upon the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that faith never settled in our hearts. And if the faith is never settled, so as soon as those wrappings and the societal the cultures will go away, the Islam will also go away with it, right? And so what is the real source of courage for Ibrahim alayhi salam? When he grew up in such a dark environment, it was not an environment where he was taught about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but was practiced about it as a common religion. So what was the real source of his courage? How courageous he was to question his father and the authority around him or even the people around him who used to worship all these idols. What was the source of courage? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us this. The second ayah of this section, وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ and so كذلك, and the كذلك is connecting the previous ayah. He just challenged his father. And so now Allah is teaching us where was that courage coming from? كذلك نري إبراهيم ملكوت السماوات والأرض. And that's how Allah showed him the malakut of the samawat and earth. What does malakut mean? Malakut is referring to the dominion and the kingdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the heavens and the earth. And everything around him, he also able to come to this conclusion that everything around him is under the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah controls the sun, the moon, the stars, everything that is the ocean, the trees, every leaf that falls. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to control everything, then no human authority is ultimate. So why are the people around him worshipping the idols who do not they themselves are being created and how can somebody else be controlled? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has the malakut of the samawat and the earth. Right? And so this fear of society disappears when the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fills his heart. Ibrahim alayhi salam filled his heart with the authority and the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so when someone truly recognizes that Allah is the king of the kings, that the pressure of everything else, the culture, the media, politics, everything else just loses it, right? Just loses in front of the authority of Allah subhanahu. Now we are talking about the idols of Ibrahim alayhi salam around him, but we might not have those idols around him, but something else has taken that place. Something else is there in our hearts, in our society around us, maybe in our cell phones and everywhere else. People are worshiping maybe status or money or careers or popularity or some kind of ideology or driven, right? Or some kind of societal approval. They want the society to conform, right? Or they want themselves to conform to the society or some kind of worldly power. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned about this kind of hidden shirk, right? This is not an apparent shirk where somebody is going in front of an idol. And Rasulullah says that this ummah will not fall into that kind of idol worshiping. But then he says shirk is more hidden than a black ant on a black rock in the darkness. Now imagine that how possible is it to see a black small ant in that black dark, very dark pitch black night? And so you have to find in yourself, I have to find in myself what kind of shit is taking place, even if it is a minutiae, if it is like a 1%, what kind of shit is there to to be removed from my life? And everything that is being obeyed or loved above Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes a source of that shirk, becomes a source of that false God. And that's what Ibrahim alayhi salam teaches us to question every false authority, every false God that has taken place inside our hearts, even if it is of the size of a small atom, even if it is too dark to see, that nobody else will perceive it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what is going in our hearts, and we have to question that even if it is of the smallest of the size of the ship. And so finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps telling us that you have to arrive and be or have that yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before coming to this faith, and where that conviction comes from is by the reflection of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah repeatedly wants us to reflect on the creation. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. Right? So many times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about the creation. One of the best places of if you want to reflect on the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Surah Al-Nahl. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions so many ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of the creation that will lead you to that conviction on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that that naturally leads the person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when you read other ayat of from the Quran that again guides the person further. So there are ayat in the creation, and then there are ayat in the Kitab of Allah, and one leads to the other. You look around yourself, and then you come back to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make you think back on the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's to and fro that will go back and forth between these ayat, and that will make you stronger and stronger in conviction. It is not a constant state that somebody has reached that conviction and that iman did not change. That iman does fluctuate. And so we need to refresh ourselves with pondering and reflecting upon these ayat. And that is something that will fill our hearts with that courage to question every other false authority around us. And that's something that Ibrahim alayhi salam taught us in the legacy that he left, that he spoke the truth openly. He challenged the falsehood and rejected the societal pressure and accepted the test that comes with it when he questions something around it. Right? And when you question the challenge, the authority around you, that's definitely coming in with a lot of challenges, with a lot of hardships. Maybe somebody is going to boycott you, somebody is going to leave you alone. But then the source of courage is only from looking at the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah will make those things easy for you, as we learned in one of the first ayat that we covered. وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكَ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ مِلَّةَ إبراهيم. When you question the false authority, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make everything easy, every test is easy along that path. And so that's why they said, وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And so after seeing those ayat and pondering upon him, he reached that level of certainty. He reached that level of conviction that made him challenge Sa'ad and every other false authority. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the sincerity of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the certainty of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the courage and the tawheed of Ibrahim alayhi salam. ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك. سبحان الله سبحانه وتعالى.